So, welcome to the Walk for Women. Today we have a very interesting interview for you between Anindita Majumdar, the founder of EquiDiversity Foundation, and Pallavi Moda, a trustee of Action Village India and the driving force behind the Walk for Women. Pallavi has been organizing the Walk for Women since 2005, and since then, walkers have been coming together to spend a day walking in the stunning location of Virginia Water to raise funds for disadvantaged women in rural India. This year, the funds raised will go towards Action Village India's partner, EquiDiversity Foundation. In this podcast, you will hear directly from Anindita about the work we are supporting this year. However, before we begin, we would like to share a bit more background about Action Village India. Action Village India, or as we sometimes say AVI, is a small UK-based organization that is since 1989 supporting Indian partner organizations who work alongside villagers in some of the most remote parts of rural India, so that they can improve their life, livelihoods, and resilience. We work towards an India which is just, fair, and inclusive, where people, regardless gender, ethnicity, caste, or belief, can benefit from the country's economic development and lift themselves out of poverty. At the heart of our work are our partnerships, and many of them have spanned decades. Our partners, whether large or small organizations, all work directly at the grassroots level across rural India, from Bihar and Jharkhand in the north to Odisha and down to Tamil Nadu in the south. The communities they work with are some of the poorest in India. Our partners are experts in their fields and design their development projects to best serve their local communities. So that's a bit about Action Village India, but we're really here to hear more about Anindita's journey and the amazing work she is doing. So I would like to hand over to Pallavi Moda, our trustee, who will be talking with Anindita today, and I'm sure we will hear a lot more from her. Pallavi, over to you.
Thank you, Esther. First of all, I would like to thank all the walkers for coming to walk on this day and supporting us, the walk, as well as Action Village India, and in turn, EquiDiversity too. As Esther mentioned, the first sponsored walk took place in 2005. It was held in the sweet memory of my beloved son Anand, who passed away at the young age of 25 in 2004. It was a very emotional moment for us, the family and the friends. The money raised by all of us was donated to Action Village India for their good work in India. Late in the same year, I participated in a forum held by AVI and their Indian partners in Tamil Nadu. We visited a number of villages where the partners were running some long-term post-tsunami projects, from desalination of land, setting up village mandis, to dairy farmings, from providing after-school meals to young children, to women's self-help groups, taking care of basic health issues in remote villages where healthcare is either unaffordable for the most or totally absent. Throughout this journey, it was clearly noticeable that the women were very actively involved and with a positive attitude in these programs. At the same time, they were bearing, if not equal, more burden on their shoulders than men, with sincerity and enthusiasm, be it their own family matters or the welfare of the village. It was this experience which inspired me to continue with sponsoring the walk from the following year and dedicated the funds raised to the women empowerment projects. For a number of years, the walk had been supporting girls' education program in Bihar and Jharkhand. This year, Walk for Women is dedicated to equally important women empowerment project by another partner of ABI, EquiDiversity. Let us find out more from Anindita, the founder director of EquiDiversity, about this organization. What motivated her in giving birth to an organization like EquiDiversity and raising it to its current state. Truly a success against all odds. Anindita, tell us about the excitements as well as the challenges you experience every day after 20 years.
Thank you so much, Pallavi. Good afternoon, everyone. Uh, it's a pleasure and an honor to be given this forum to talk about the work that we are doing in very remote villages of West Bengal. And I'm deeply moved by the personal journey, Pallavi, that you shared. It's a very rare thing that we, on the other side, who receive funds, we get to hear, the personal stories and the journeys that you go through. Thank you. So I was born in a very typical, educated, middle class family in Bengal, where from childhood the ideas that you have to study and you have to stand on your own feet, were grilled inside our heads. But still, growing up, I essentially, wanted to become the boy that my parents wanted to have. And it was only when I was in my adolescent years that I started becoming comfortable in my own skin. I put on the gender lens, and the world appeared to be very bleak, very gray. My next stint, actually, in directly, working on gender issues began when I was doing my post graduation, and I was working on my dissertation on female criminality, and I was working in correctional homes. There I essentially was completely struck by the institutions, the dehumanization process that every individual in the system goes through, and also how patriarchal the system becomes. And I rebelled and decided to work in the development sector. So I've been working in this sector for almost 20 years now, and having worked against gender based violence for more than a decade, I understood that all the work that we do around the gender space would actually amount to nothing unless we address the core issue. And for me, the core issue was essentially understanding how decision making takes place in society through governance. And I was also at that time, engrossed in the newly emerging conversation around the country at that time, around reservation quotas in the national parliament. And slowly my interest in the idea of, working to create a gender equitable society through gender equitable governance, started taking shape. And here, I just remember that this kind of an idea was also shaped by certain appalling incidents, like for instance when I in way back in 2006 and 7 when I was working in an urban slum area where already we had there was reservation 33% of reservation in place for gender based quota was in place. I found that how a particular seat that was reserved for women would be sort of taken over by the male member, and who would not only never allow her to sit in office but would also sign the documents using her name. And interestingly, I also found that a particular seat that was reserved for women during the urban election, particular individual would actually he pushed his daughter and two daughters-in-laws to contest election from different political parties, to ensure that the seat remains under his control. And working in this sector, I also found that all the NGOs, when we work in our communities, we have to engage with local government and administration, but we develop this skill of bypassing, the women who are in that space, and we would, in order to get our job done, we would just interact with the male and never question that. So that bothered me, and finally, I designed a program in 2014. It was a pilot program, and it was supported by the US Department of State to sort of pilot this program where we sort of empower women in the rural panchayat areas, where we have to empower women who have elected representatives, and in order to strengthen their voice in decision making so that they can bring women's issues into policy. So, and then with the change in political leadership in the US, this particular program, after 1 year, this entire funding got disbanded. And so here I was, looking at the probability. We had a very successful sort of pilot, but and the community was largely, asking us to continue work. But the organization I was working, for at that time, because there was no money involved, was not willing to, take a risk and take this work forward. So that is how, in 2016 September, EquiDiversity Foundation was born.
That is a very, very interesting journey that you just mentioned. Anindita, hats off to you, what you just have done. And out of all of this was just a general information. Do you think you can pick up a case where you can tell our workers in more detail about the real experience you went through?
So let me just tell a little bit about exactly what we do. So EquiDiversity Foundation, we sort of envision a society where there is gender equality, there is co-sharing of power and freedom from gender-based violence. And we do that by promoting, we promote gender equality through political, social, and financial empowerment, and with active, informed participation of individuals, the community, and the state. It may sound a bit complicated, but to put it very simply, so we are because we feel that in order for governance to be, gender inclusive, in order for society to be gender equal, we have to work with people who are in power. We have to also work with individuals who make these decisions, who influence these decisions, that is the voters. So I'll just share a case study of this woman when we started working. So this is in one remote village of Birbhum. So let's say her name is Amira. So Amira is a woman, who actually hails from a very marginalized, economically marginalized family, and she belongs to the minority community, where and she decides to fight for election, panchayat election for the first time. And so what is her background? Amira was married off at the age of 16. She has 3 daughters, including one differently able daughter, and for that she was scorned off at the family. So she goes against her family's wishes and decides to nominate herself, for the panchayat member, and she wins. She's ostracized by her family, and with twinkle in her eyes, Amira, goes to the panchayat office because she believes that, she can bring changes to the lives of women, of differently abled children, because now she has the power. What she witnesses is a root shock. She realizes that decision making in the panchayat is completely controlled by men, and she's not even expected to turn up to the panchayat. All the meetings take place, and the attendance register goes to her house. She just have to put a sign on it. So that is her essential role. But Amira, being Amira, she's not satisfied. So she wants answers. She wants to ask questions, but she doesn't have the confidence, to ask the right questions, because she knows that being a woman, if she opens her mouth, she'll be deemed to be, dumb. Um, so what EquiDiversity Foundation does? EquiDiversity Foundation works with women like Amira, and mind you, West Bengal government has in India at the moment there are 21 states only who has the provision of 50% of reservation of women. At all the 3 tiers of the panchayat system. And but what we witness, like I mentioned, is essentially proxy leadership. And so what EquiDiversity does is EquiDiversity works with these women, and essentially works with these women and sort of through various trainings in gender sensitization, laws, the panchayat system, justice, what is the role, and how can they identify funds and bring about changes in the policy. So that is at one level. But we also realize that working with women is not enough. We have to work with the male leadership, because unless they are able to change their mindset and create a space where there is a discussion and openness, and they're able to ready to share leadership
Right.
roles, then nothing will change. So we also focus on working on the men. Again, taking them through this journey of understanding how gender has also sort of shaped them, what are the gender trappings they are holding. Because one thing we also realize that while it's true that women are the least resourceful in this entire process or picture, men elected representatives who also hail from, say, very vulnerable social economic group, and will also sort of have same kind of lack in confidence and information. So those are there. So somewhere down the line, we try to bridge the gap and bring the vulnerable groups together and sort of work with them so that they find their voice. Essentially a direct work with the women elected representatives, men, and so that's at one level. Yes.
So it sounds as if there is an infrastructure in place to help out, fair infrastructure in place, but it is just this male dominance in every area you look at is your core challenge, and that is what you seem to be all the time confronting. So how exactly you get backing for women from all the women around you, and what you take forward to these organizations or um, even government to
Right.
put your case across? How do you make it happen?
Right. So one thing, what like I've realized over my years of experience is that while we say that it is male dominance, the other thing is people, like I said, like my earlier experience, people who are in the system, um, they are also, they also are disempowered in the sense that when you are dehumanized, you are also not you. When you lack, the system is such that that sort of teaches you that your power, you can only enjoy power when you dominate, or if you have empathy, if you sort of then you are weak. So I think so sometimes people who are in this system, in men as well as women who are in this system, sometimes they don't change, not simply because they don't want to change, but they don't also know how. So I think so. Like I said, one of our major strategy is capacity development, or the other strategy is to create models, to create sort of demonstrative ideas, how they can sort of bring about a change in policy and get benefited by it. For
Mhm.
instance, if I say that. Um, so, for instance, like in this one Gram Panchayat, we had, even though the law mandated for 50% of reservation, in this Gram Panchayat, there was
Mhm.
70% of women elected representatives. So that was a huge thing. So, but interestingly, what we found that women were not coming to Gram Panchayat meetings and all regularly. And on deeper sort of analysis, it was found that many of them had very small children. And even though when their families are allowing them to stand for election,
Mhm.
their key role continues to be familial responsibilities.
Mhm.
So that still remains the key. And without support, she having to deal with everything, and leaving a small child behind was a problem. So when we sort of took this up in one of our workshops, like, okay, in such a situation, imagine that there is a woman who is who has a 6 month child, and she is now an elected representative and the convener of the Women and Child Development, and Social Welfare Subcommittee in the Gram Panchayat, and she can't attend. What do you do? So
Yeah.
interestingly, the first things, all men and also women said, it was a mistake to choose her. She was pregnant at the time. We should have thought it was a wrong thing to give her, nomination, because she would never be able to fulfill, her responsibilities. From that sort of a response, we had to, through our work, we had to go into a situation where these men and women together came up with the idea of a creche within the Gram Panchayat. And so that sort of happened through policy change and through allotting budget, and these women could actually, they started bringing their children when they attended meetings and took part in governance. So I think sometimes we feel that purposely you don't want to change, but the fact of the matter remains that we also don't have very many examples of how policy can be made gender responsive. So those
Yes.
sort of ideas and sort of pushing also helps the
Mm.
system think differently.
So in this kind, it sounds like that the problem is not just about challenging the systems, but it is to do with really educating people and encourage people and make them understand what they can achieve and what they can expect from system. That's what it sounds like. And this is so good to know, because what you hear from media is totally different story. So
Mhm.
this is something so interesting for me. So tell us more about what kind of projects you run for encouraging people, even involving men more into this situation, and educating even children, women. How do you deal? How do you come up with ideas, and how do you make these things happen?
Right. So when we started working with the women elected representative and the male leadership, we started realizing that so there is this demand and supply chain that was working, meaning we had a 50% reservation. So
Mhm.
law mandates women to be in this space,
Mm.
but the issue was in supply. Like, who are these women who are apparently being chosen by the political leadership? So
Mm.
we did a survey into and what we found was that around 92.6% of the women who were brought into this field had no experience,
Mhm.
and 37% felt that they didn't have the confidence to ask any question.
Mhm.
And interestingly, we found that around almost 65% of the women elected representatives had no income of their own.
Right.
Only around 4% were graduates. And they around 77% said that they have faced various forms of gender-based violence and control that
Mhm.
disempowers them.
Mhm.
And the other interesting part of them was that around 64% said that they had filed nomination because some family members or a political party leader sort of said, you do that, we'll take care of it. So they had no interest in it. And the other aspect that we found was that only 22% women who have been in the space for a while have been, have got tickets or nominations more than once. So that was a very interesting thing to note. That even when women are in this space for some years, even then, they are not giving nominations. So, so with this understanding, we realized that there was a problem with the supply chain. Now, what do we do with that? So to do that, we realized that the other big area that we have to work in was to work with the women voters, so the women in the community. So
Right.
we have to work in a manner where these women become automatic choice for all political leadership, to seek when they are looking at nominations, and then hopefully we'll have a large number of these women who are aware, who they're aware about panchayat, they're aware of what governance is, they're aware of how to elect and how to make policy changes, how to influence that. So we create this. So we started working with the women in the community, and now what has evolved in many of the places where we are working, these groups of Nari Jagran committees, that
Mm.
is women awareness committees that have evolved. Now, what do these committees do? Now, these in some, in two, we have been able, like in 2 or 3 gram panchayats. So these committees have now become a part of the women and child development subcommittee of the gram panchayat. Now, this is important because if you look at the budgets in the panchayat, you'll find that this particular committee allocates the least, not even 1% of budget, for functioning. So we felt that as an organization, we have to sort of influence them to change that. And the influence can only happen when women get involved. Not only women who is an elected representative, but also women, women voters. They ask, demand to put their issues forward. So we started working with these Nari Jagran
Right.
committees. So they would raise the policies and plans, and that would figure in the panchayat planning and budgeting. So that is how. So that's at one area where we are strengthening the Nari Jagran committees, not only to bring their issues forward, but also addressing like one of the top 2-3 issues that women always talk about. One is addressing violence, gender-based violence and control, and the second is economic independence. So then we are focusing on these Nari Jagran committees with our goal in future that these committees eventually evolve as community-based organizations and look into development issues in the entire area with a gender lens. So that's one area where we looking at. But we have also realized that when we are focusing on women, it's going to take a long time. We have to have
Yes.
another
Yes.
plan in place.
So sorry. So what I was going to ask to you,
Huh.
that this is brilliant. What you are doing is so brilliant to make women aware of their issues and then encourage them to what they should be doing. However, it makes me think that in this kind of situation, there must be still a lot of party politics cropping up. So what do you do? Do you encourage them to stand up as independent candidates, or on what basis they change their, because each party has manifesto, and how do you save women from channelized into party politics and party-based all these agendas?
Right.
That must be a
So
challenge.
yeah, it's a huge challenge
Mhm.
because West Bengal, is the only state in the country where panchayat elections are fought directly along political party lines. Rest of
Yes.
India, you'll find individuals standing, there is backing, of course, but here it's under the political party banner. So how do we change? Again, we look at 2-3 things. Now, generally, if you look at how political party functions, a political party requires to mobilize, women to sort of give a statement to the community that we are strong, so we can mobilize so many women. And if you look at the changing politics or elections in the country, you'll find that today more and more women are coming out to vote. Not only are they coming out to vote, but they are voting differently from men. So that
Right.
means that women are able to look at issues differently. So they're focusing on issues that concern them.
Yeah.
So with that, when we are, our work with these women through the Nari Jagaran committees is basically to understand what politics is. People would say that politics is generally about political parties, but it's not.
Mm.
It's about where you are. It's about your policies. It's about how
Yeah.
you do that. The moment you start complaining about the road you're walking around, you are being political. So we sort of
Yeah.
break.
So in other words, you are working with women to make them strong and make their voice strong, in
Absolutely.
turn to make the parties change their agendas and their whatever the programs are, which is wonderful. That is such a wonderful work. So this seems really, really encouraging in what I have heard about, West Bengal, especially the last election and the post-election violence and what I had heard in media and all of that. I think what you are doing is wonderful. Going forward as you go along, and please continue with this wonderful work, but going along in future, do you think that making young people aware of the problems, make them understand the gender equality and your other goals of the equidiversity would make big difference? And what do you do in that arena, working with children and working with young people? Do you have any programs?
Absolutely. So we feel that if you have to work around gender equality, work around values of democracy, work around issues of empathy, you have to catch people young.
Mhm.
So interestingly, many of our programs were not sort of conceived from the very beginning, but it sort of evolved, and it evolved from the community, and it evolved from the experience of the women elected representatives and members of the Nari Jagran committees. So with their experience, first came the problem how education was being imparted in government schools, and thousands of issues of school dropouts and teachers not coming, and lots of issues. And so we were sort of put in a place where we were asked, I mean, what can we do now? Education is a subject, where the Gram Panchayat basically, plays a monitoring role. It doesn't have much role because it is handled by the Education Ministry of Education. So with that, we sort of we just I remember that there was some time ago, there was an order talking about that every school should have a child parliament. So we picked that one up, and through the concept of a child parliament, what we do, we work with the children, so that they're able to work with the children essentially around autonomy and leadership, so that they're able to promote child rights, gender equality, child protection, and also work with the young mind so that they're able to critically think and problem solve. And so these children, they undertake proper election to choose their parliament, their prime minister and the ministers.
Wow.
And they really monitor the work of these ministers. For instance, I'll just give you a small example how say for instance education minister for education and his or her group is directly responsible to see that a child is not missing a class. So if a child is absent, the minister with his or her group will rush to the house, find out what's happening, and sort of report, and provide support. So there is another process where there's a box called thought and feeling box, where children are encouraged to talk about issues they face, issues at home, issues in the school, and then they are encouraged to problem solve, take the matter up, take the issue up. Recently, there was a meeting we organized, an interface with the children and the Gram Panchayat, where they raised certain issues like there's no boundary wall in around the school. The pond doesn't have sort of fencing, which is dangerous. They talked about broken doors in the toilet. So they've started raising a lot of issues that concern them. Girls raising wives in their football because it's a girls' school. So they start raising such issues. So that's with children. We also work with the youth, because with boys and girls, because in the field areas where we work, we have found that the average age for girls getting married is 16, and for boys it is essentially it is 18 or 19. So both under the legal age of marriage, and they're becoming parents within 1 year. So what happens to, and interestingly we find that a lot of boys are dropping out currently, especially with COVID and with large number of natural disasters hitting. So a lot of boys are sort of dropping out, migrating to unsafe places for work, or they will join a political party, and there they'll sort of experiencing and masculinity and the toxic the ideas of masculinity that will be carried on. So with this idea, we've started working with men and boys. We've started working with girls, basically to provide them with a space, a safe space where they can talk about anything under the sun, like sexuality, masculinity, whatever they want to talk about, and sort of trying to create a space where, again, they can imbibe the skill of empathy, inclusion, gender equality, and then slowly start working on it through small, social projects in their community.
Yeah, and I think that is the right age when they need to understand the equality, gender equality, and also respect the other gender. It's so important, and there cannot be a better way of teaching it than teaching through education, no matter what age, and not just only gender equality, just civic sense and their civic responsibilities and civic duties, all of that is so, so important. And actually, if I talk about my childhood, when I was born and brought up in India, and in our school, we had all these kinds of programs 40, 50 years back. So, I can tell you that that is the best way of learning these responsibilities and duties, and that's what in turn makes a good citizen. I'm not boasting that I'm a good citizen, but I'm just saying that is the way going forward. So that was just my comment. But Anindita, every organization has challenges. Now that you are working and involved so deeply, every organization also has a roadmap for the future. Tell us a little bit more about your roadmap for the future and your challenges in terms of financial challenge or any social issues that really holding you back. Just tell us. Thank you.
Right. So, I think I mentioned a little bit about one of our strategies. So, in terms of holding on and sort of encouraging leadership in future, we want to start Lead India Fellowship Program. Where we create a pool of fellows, of former elected representatives and local youth, especially women, who are the future political leaders. So they can work as mentors, for the newly elected representatives, and role models for the community, and sort of motivate these, leaders, mentoring them and providing a platform to express themselves. So that's at one level. Secondly, we our future strategies also, to focus on strengthening the Nari Jagran committees as independent organizations. So not only that, so we believe that when EquiDiversity Foundation, which is essentially playing the role of facilitator, of a nurture, a mentor. So when there will be a point when we sort of take a step backward and sort of go, and do the work in somewhere else. And the Nari Jagran committees as independent organization, takes charge of promoting, development, looks at the development discourse from a gender lens, looks at it from the lens of, equality, from sustainability, environmental sustainability. So they are able to sort of bring intersectionalities of different issues and look at development from that point. So that's our goal, to develop in the Nari Jagran committees as independent organizations. And also, in the near future, we are also thinking of developing a curriculum or a course on on democracy and role of voters as guardians of democracy. So that so when a rural woman or a young girl before elections understand what election is all about, understand how to evaluate a leader, evaluate the work of a leader, understand the election manifestos, and takes a decision, based on not only on how I have benefited from the last government, but also looks at the bigger issue. So that's also something we are looking at. And lastly, but not least, I think our focus in future would also be more on, understanding gender inclusiveness within the political parties. You had asked me this question before. How can we influence local political parties, to sort of reflect back on their gender policies, if at all they have it? Most of them have it on paper, but how do we sort of motivate them to look into the fact that, if they're able to mentor more women and nurture them, instead of that 22% getting, a second time nomination, if you bring more women into the fore, how it can strengthen the party, how it can strengthen you as somebody who believes in this. So I think these are some of the ways in which we want to work in the future.
Right.
Challenges are like many. To highlight
I'm
just
sure.
a few, so highlight just a few. I think one of the biggest challenge is, you have these women who at the end of their term, start talking, speaking their mind, asking questions, giving suggestions, are active on the ground. So suddenly you find that they fail to get nominations in the next election, and without this critical mass of active women leaders in the locality, so this trend of getting ignored will continue. So the other biggest challenge that we have, and actually always had since we began, because the way sort of equidiversity was formed out of the blue without much planning and thought. So we've always had this issue of lack of funds. So in spite of the fact that we have, a very tested capacity development design, but we've not been able to sort of implement it. So most of them, are designed as residential workshops, and so we had to sort of change them to make it like a half day or a 1 day program. So funds has been an issue for us. The other challenge that we face is because we work with systems, oftentimes systems have, people, systems are run by people. So when you have, the right kind of people, with an attitude where they want to experiment, they want to change, then, you're able to achieve a lot in a particular period of time. But if not, then you take 2 steps, forward, then have to go, 3 steps back and start all over again. So that's also a challenge. It's a sort of, it is a cyclic thing, but you have to be at it. So yeah, these are our top three, I would say.
Right. So it sounds like you probably need lots of volunteers to support all these activities. And also you must have some paid staff as well. Do you?
Yes. So what we do is very sort of very specific and requires a lot of skill. So how the way the organization works. So one of our uniqueness as an organization is the fact that the entire team is a homegrown team, meaning all whether it is staff or whether local volunteers, all of them are local people. So we believe in developing human capital. So yes, we have a group of 6 to 7 paid staff. Rest are essentially volunteers, and who get some honorarium for travel and for refreshment.
Yes.
And so these volunteers they also emerge from the Nari Jagran committee. So the Nari Jagran committees, they have developed, they have sub teams within themselves. So for instance, they have a livelihood team, awareness team, a case management team. So these teams. So our job is to develop them, these teams, and also sort of include them, engage them in the work that is going on. So that's basically our model of functioning.
And in terms of these overheads you mentioned and the cost of staffs you mentioned, do you have any other expenses or material costs or anything else?
Yeah, absolutely. So most of our if you look at basic nature of our work, so we work the strategy is based on 2-3 pillars. One pillar is capacity development. The second pillar is awareness. The third pillar would be networking. So essentially, and advocacy. So that's a fourth pillar. So for capacity development, because our capacity development programs are extremely intense, and we do a lot of them throughout the year. So most of the cost entails, is running those workshops, and as I mentioned, those work best essentially for women. If you take them out of that environment and take them away, and so that they feel relaxed and they tend to sort of open up more. So we do a lot of residential. We plan to do a lot of residential ones. The other area, so a lot of our funding is programmatic. So our administrative cost is much lower than the programmatic cost.
Yes. Well, I absolutely agree with you, and Esther will agree with that too. And our challenges with AVI very similar when dealing with funds. Anyway, but let me tell you that so far Walk for Women has, even before the event takes place, we have raised £1,579 as I speak, and we have targeted for £6,000. I'm not at this point certain what will be AVI's aim to help you out with, but let us hope that our walkers today donate generously towards all these programs. And good luck to you, Anindita, and keep up with good work. Thank you.
Excellent. I've really enjoyed listening to you, Anindita, and to you, Pallavi, as well. Like Pallavi said, you know, this is a hugely important cause. It's impressive work that Anindita is working on together with her team and the women from their communities that they support. So I hope that you've all enjoyed this this podcast and that you will all support EquiDiversity's work. You can do so on our website, which is www.actionvillageindia.org.uk/support-us, or you can do so on the Just Giving page, the Walk for Women Just Giving page, which will be accompanied in the information about the Walk for Women. Anindita, thank you so very much for sharing your story and the work that you are doing and the challenges that you are facing. I know for one that I'm very much looking forward to collaborating more and more with you. This is actually the first time we're going to support this project. So I'm very much looking forward to see how it's going to go.
Thank you so much, Esther. You know, I'm very, very grateful to AVI, you and to Pallavi, and to all the walkers. These are difficult times, and even in these difficult times, you know, you are going to take that time and, you know, to support the work that we are doing. You know, our heartiest thanks to all of you.
Excellent, thank you. And for all the walkers, we hope that you have a fantastic day today. I hope you're lucky and have some sunshine. I hope you've managed to prepare some of the delicious recipes that Pallavi has prepared for you. And we wish you all the very best, and we will be in touch soon. Thank you.